NBA champion coach Michael Malone has officially been named the next head coach at North Carolina. But Andy, here's the big question everyone's asking. Will it work?
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, happy Wednesday. What's up? Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast. Andy, we're in the postseason. It's very sad.
Off season, yeah, here we are.
Off season, but it feels like it's still the busiest time of the year because it's portal season, baby. We're your hosts. He's Andy Patton. I'm Isaac Schade. This is Locked On College Basketball. Here's where we're headed on the show today. We are talking about the portal. At the end of the show, we're going to discuss some of the biggest names that are in the portal, at least as we record on Tuesday evening. We're going to give hey, who's the biggest shock in your mind to enter? We will look just kind of at the idea of the portal. We had a new opening date this year, so we're going to look at just the craziness of how many names are in. But Andy, we got to start with the big news that we hadn't really had time yet to talk about because of the end of the NCAA tournament. But North Carolina, who fired Hubert Davis 2 weeks ago, has now found their man. It was not Tommy Lloyd. It was not Dusty May. They did not want to wait on Billy Donovan. And kind of under the cloak of night, they go out and hire NBA champion head coach Michael, not Mike, he'll get you, Malone, who is not coaching this year. So he's actually been hanging out a lot in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, where his daughter Bridget is a sophomore volleyball player for the Tar Heels. And Andy Patton on Tuesday, North Carolina held a press conference to officially introduce Coach Malone as the 20th head man of the Tar Heels. So, Andy, I want to ask you the big picture question that everyone's going to asking. This dude has a winning pedigree, over 500 NBA wins, the most wins in Nuggets history, the 2023 NBA championship. But he's coming to college where he's only ever been an assistant. Andy Patton, will it work?
I think so. I think this is going to work. And I don't know if it's going to work right away. I think there is a learning curve as a coach going from either level, from NBA to college or college to NBA. So it does depend a little bit on how patient North Carolina is. And of course, as it would apply to any coach, it depends on how much resources they're willing to allocate to him, how much funding he can do on his own. But to me, I think the biggest kind of question, I'm not concerned about his actual in-game coaching ability. He is a phenomenal coach. The Denver Nuggets did not fire him because of his in-game coaching ability. As you mentioned, he won 500 games. He won a championship. His X's and O's are going to be stout. That is not something that I am concerned about. There's a chance that it doesn't work. The game doesn't translate, but I think that's probably going to be fine. More so, it is the ability of Malone and his staff to recruit to his skill sets and to his style. Again, he has a distinct style. I think that the style can scale to the college game fine, but you have to be able to bring in players that fit that, or you have to be willing to adjust your style, sometimes fairly significantly, in order to adapt to the players that you have. In the transfer portal era, that's less of a concern because you have more autonomy on who is going to be on your roster. But still, the best coaches are coaches who do make adjustments. They figure out, hey, this, Tommy Lloyd's team was really good at scoring around the rim because that was the talent they had. And if he brought in a roster that had more three-point shooting, they would shoot more threes. It's just, you have to make that adjustment. Mark Few, I've been following him for 20 years. He's made all sorts of adjustments to the style that he coaches. And obviously the same is true for Danny Hurley and Izzo and all the greats in this sport. But for Malone, it's the ability to make those adjustments when they come up, but also find the players that fit the system that you want to run. And in the NBA, you have a GM, they do that job for you. Malone kind of somewhat famously fought with the GM for the Denver Nuggets. So that is something to keep an eye on as well. If can they Malone will have more autonomy over that, but can he make the right decisions? Can he bring in the players that fit what he wants to do on the court? And then, and you and I talked about this a lot in the Danny Hurley conversation last week, can he bring in players that fit his personality? Because his personality is not going to be for everybody. Let's put it that way. And if he's bringing in players who are not going to respond well to the style that he displays on the sideline or in the locker room or things like that, that's going to be a problem too. And so I think those are the big question marks. And that's why I think it might take a year or two, hopefully only a year. He's coming in a little behind the sticks. The portal technically only opened the less than 24 hours after he got the job. But let's be real, there's been recruiting and conversations happening for the last couple of weeks that North Carolina did not get to be a part of. So we'll see how it goes in year one, but I do think this is ultimately going to work. It just might take maybe 2 years.
Yeah, that's a great point, Andy. And yeah, I mean, it is a very specific type of player. He wants rough and tumble guys. I heard a quote from Tyler Hansborough, who's like, I love this because we're going to be tough and hard nosed. It's like, well, of course, that's what Tyler Hansborough wants. Look at him run around like a bull in a china shop. But Andy, what's interesting to me is you talked about the GM. I think of the movie Draft Day. Have you ever seen that movie with Kevin Costner where he's coaching the Browns? Or not coaching, excuse me. He's the GM. And that's the distinction here is he's basically like, it's my job to put this team together. And then you, whatever homeboy's name is, I can see his face, but I can't think of the actor's name. It's your job to go out and coach this team.
Right.
And that's the difference we see at the collegiate level as we start to get GMs is Jim Tanner, North Carolina's GM, was Hubert Davis's handpicked guy. And it's not a contentious thing. It's, hey, we're going to work together to do this. At least from some of the way he talked at his press conference, it sounds like Coach Michael Malone is going to keep Jim Tanner. Now we'll see as everything starts to come out. But I think there is a big difference in that type of the dynamic of that GM head coach relationship from the NBA to the NCAA. And so I think that could work better as they work hand in hand to figure out who to identify in terms of, Coach Malone at his conference talked about, I want to identify our current guys and who's going to be able to be here. And then we'll start going to look out beyond that. And Andy, I think the critical thing here is who it is that he has around him, whether it's new people coming in or does he maintain? It sounds like maybe he keeps one or two of the current assistant coaches that were under Hubert Davis, namely Pat Sullivan, who's from his neck of the woods up in the New York, New Jersey area, and maybe Sean May as well. I think a critical bridge in this, Andy, is going to be Eric Hoots, who is like the guy. A lot of people outside of North Carolina aren't going to know his name, but he's the guy that is the bridge and the connection to all Carolina basketball alums. When they need tickets, that's who they go to. He makes the wheels churn. It is Eric Hoots and the incoming athletic director, Steve Newmark, who flew to Coach Malone's house for 5 hours on Easter Sunday to get this done. And so I think that is another critical piece, maybe an unknown name, but that can help get this going. But then I'm watching who are those other names that Coach brings in.
Well, I'll tell you what, our good friend of the podcast, friend of the Bracket Breakdown show, Jesse Hawley, has been very adamant about them keeping Eric Hoots. I have seen that numerous times on his social media account. And obviously, as somebody who was a national champion winner for North Carolina in 2005, I would imagine I would trust his opinion on that matter very much so. So I hopefully Coach Malone will do that. But yeah, I think everything you said makes a ton of sense. I think if they get the right pieces in the coaching staff, keep the right pieces and bring in people who can really help him with the sides of this sport that are going to be unfamiliar to him. Like, I don't think Michael Malone is incapable of schmoozing with donors, and I don't think he's incapable of identifying talent, but it does happen differently at the college level. Like, he does not have to talk to agents, but that is something that will happen at the college level. Again, if they keep Tanner or they bring in a new GM, they'll have them doing that, but he's still going to have some roles in that. So that to me stands out as something that will be worth watching here. And if they get the right staff around him, I think you do have the expectation that this maybe is a fairly quick turnaround for this team, and something that happens, within 2 years where they're back at the top of this conference. I mean, they may not ever dip below the top handful of teams in this conference and start competing with Duke at a high level. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens very soon for this team.
Yeah, Andy, and it sounds like from the great reporting of Inside Carolina, who is Carolina's On3 site, that Coach Malone is targeting Chuck Martin as his lead assistant. He has been with Coach Cal the last 3 years, so the last year at Kentucky and these past 2 years at Arkansas, so we'll keep our eyes on that. Andy, this is all part of a trend of NBA coaches coming to the NCAA level. We saw it with Kevin Young to BYU, with Alex Jensen to Utah, with Luke Laux to Florida State, with Jacques Vaughn, who was the first one that was a head coach at the NBA level with the Nets, but he was coming to be an assistant at Kansas under Bill Self. This is the first time, at least that I can think of, where we've seen a guy that was an NBA head coach. Malone was not this year because he had been fired last year by the Nuggets, but going from head coach to head coach. So we'll see how that fits. And Andy, notably, a lot of people have said this, but let's get it out there. Larry Brown, North Carolina basketball player, oh, by the way, is the only coach ever to win an NCAA championship, the amazing Kansas Jayhawks in '88 with Danny Manning, and then has an NBA championship as well. Coach Malone already has the NBA one. The AD Bubba Cunningham was making jokes about asking people to slide over the banners to make room for a new one. So we'll see if Coach Malone can join that company. Andy, obviously, when you get a situation like this, there's a lot of player movement. There are already 7 North Carolina Tar Heels who have entered the portal. Most of them, though, have said, hey, with the option to return, I'm keeping my options open. We know that Seth Trimble is gone. We know that Caleb Wilson is off to the NBA. Luka Bogovac has already declared his intent to come back. But, Andy, I think key now for Coach Malone is, can he maintain Henri Veesaar, who is not Nikola Jokic, doesn't play his game, but boy, he could do a lot of what he does. Jarrin Stevenson. And then can he keep the critical freshman intact in Dylan Mingo, who is not decommitting, and then Maxwell Adams as well. So we'll see how all that roster stuff plays out for Coach Michael Malone.
Yeah, I'm very fascinated to see how the players respond to this. I mean, Veesaar seems like a really great fit to stay, and so does Stevenson. I think both those guys feel like really good Michael Malone type players. So if you retain those 2 guys, if you keep both Mingo and Adams, at the very least one of them, but both would be great, you're in pretty good shape. Bogovac's coming back is already a big deal. Out of the guys who are in the transfer portal, you'd love to get Derek Dixon back. I mean, I think that would be huge. You'd love to get Jonathan Powell back too. After that, I don't want to say that the other guys are not. Like you wouldn't want them back necessarily, but they're all a bit more replaceable. I imagine most people in Chapel Hill are totally fine that Kyan Evans is in the transfer portal. He had a disappointing season. And guys like Zayden High and Jaden Young and James Brown, like they're, again, if you don't get them back, you can find players that will do what they do on this market. Like it's not going to be catastrophic. Dixon would be a bit more of a loss. Again, it's replaceable, but it's going to cost a pretty penny, and you'd like to have somebody in Dixon back in Chapel Hill. So I'm curious to see how that process goes for Coach Malone. It's always fascinating to see coaches who haven't really had to navigate this, but who have the pedigree that he does. Like, how much do these 18-year-old kids care about a former NBA head coach? Remains to be seen, but Carolina's got the money, they got the prestige, they got the willingness to spend. I think there's a real chance that this roster looks pretty darn solid in a couple weeks.
Well, and Andy, a big part of this is that since you didn't get a Tommy Lloyd, for example, there's no buyout because Michael Malone wasn't coaching anywhere. So that's $9 million saved, whatever it is. Andy, as we're about to talk about the transfer portal, you bring up a really interesting point. You and I are both baseball guys. One of the things I always look at is wins above replacement WAR. I wonder if that's going to become like a thing we start quantifying in the transfer portal era of like, as you lose guys, what is like portal replacement above portal, or what, you know, like, I don't know what the phrase would be, but that type of thing in terms of how you replace outgoing, that's just going to be fascinating to watch.
Yeah, it seems like an incredibly difficult stat to pull together because of the quality of competition is so different than it is in the major leagues or other professional sports, where you can basically say over a 162 game or 82 game or 18 game season for those pro sports that their schedule's fairly even. But like Evan Miyakawa's website does BPR, Bayesian Performance Rating, which I think is fairly close. It's not perfect. It's on a per minute basis. So players who are really productive in a 15-minute per game role are kind of a little bit elevated in their overall rating, but for the most part, I think it does a decent job of kind of quantifying that as best as possible. But yeah, I do wonder if we'll start to see kind of some data on that or some, looks at, hey, how this, but again, with all the systems being so different, a guy like, Michael Ajayi, who was highly productive at Pepperdine, not good at Gonzaga, great at Butler, like it was just a system thing more or less. So it's going to be hard to quantify, but I am interested to see if or when we get something like that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the transfer portal, Isaac, because it's been officially open for less than 24 hours as we're recording this, probably about 24 hours as many of you are listening to this, but we're already rapidly approaching 2,000 players who have entered the portal. Is this sustainable long-term? We're going to talk about that and the timing of the portal opening this year, which has changed, coming up here in just a second.
I'm Clea Butler, host of Locked On Women's Basketball, and this is Mazda's Women's Basketball Snapshot, celebrating the work no highlight reel can ever capture. UCLA made history by winning its first NCAA Women's Basketball National Championship, dominating South Carolina 79-51. The Bruins controlled the game from start to finish with elite defense and balanced scoring, finishing the season 37-1. Star center Lauren Betts was named Most Outstanding Player, leading a team effort that capped a 31-game winning streak. Under head coach Corey Close, UCLA secured a landmark title that has been decades in the making. These moments are earned off the clock, those long before the lights ever come on. The sweat, the fakes, the doubt, the scrapes. I'm coming back for more every time. Mazda puts that same drive into every detail. Wins define the moment. Putting in the work, that defines you. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you.
All right, folks, I want to thank all of you for making Locked On College Basketball your first listen or watch of the day. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And if you have been thinking about joining the Everydayer Club, now is the time. You get ad-free versions of the show. You get text access, one-on-one text access with the both of us. And you can use promo code MARCH to get your first month completely free. Head to lockedoncollegebasketball.supercast.com or tap the link in the show notes. Isaac, transfer portal is open. It feels like it's sort of been open for a few weeks. We could talk about that in a second because there was a lot of players who entered the portal who we already knew were going to do so. But as we're recording this right now on Tuesday evening, the latest number that I have seen on social media is over 1,600 players have entered the transfer portal. And based on some calculations, it seems like that's probably upwards of 40-ish% of Division I players in the portal. And this is the third year now where we've seen these just insanely high numbers of players in the portal. And every time around this year, there's sort of this kind of feeling of panic or dread or consternation around this transfer portal. And while I understand not liking it and not feeling good if you're a team who's had 6, 7, 8, 9 plus players enter the portal, it feels like every year we have this conversation and every year afterwards it starts to kind of normalize a little bit. What are your thoughts on what we've seen 24 hours-ish into this portal being open?
Well, I think a couple things have led to the rapidity of how quickly people have gotten into it is that, and I know we're going to talk the date of the opening here in a second, Andy, but it's just like because for the third straight season we've pushed back, which is something we've been clamoring for. I think there was already this groundswell of people just ready to hit send at 12:01 a.m. Eastern time, and I think also the shortness of the shortness of the duration of how long it's open is people are like, I want to make sure that I am taken care of, that I'm not overlooked or whatever it is. And so let me do it right now. Why wait? Grab a Snickers. Let's hop in. And so, it makes sense how quickly this thing was populated where, in previous years, we've had a lot on day one or day two, but not like this. AP, it's taken a couple days typically to get to this. But I think when I look at the context of how it's set up now in 2026, it makes a ton of sense to me, but that does not make it any less overwhelming to see these numbers less than one day into this thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's like we had players announcing that they were going to enter the transfer portal in mid-March, like 3 weeks ago, which again, last year you were able to do it. Like it would have been the equivalent of I guess March 24th or whatever, when you would have been able to do it last year. The year before that,
was it the day after the Elite Eight last year?
Yeah, it was, yes, it was after the Elite Eight was set. And then the year before that, it was the day after Selection Sunday, which was a nightmare. So I think this is absolutely better, unquestionably, but it's also not, in some ways it's not that different because again, we had announcements like when Randy Bennett was hired at Arizona State and left St. Mary's, like three or four of their players entered the portal or said they were entering the portal after that. And that was like over 2 weeks ago. And again, I don't blame them for making it clear that they're going to do that, but we're kind of sitting here pretending that there was not conversations that were happening between coaches and again, contacting players specifically during the season or before the portal window opens that's sketchy. And I don't think a lot of coaches are doing that, but the conversations with agents are absolutely
I
happening.
was going to say coaches might not be.
Yeah, but like agents are talking to coaches and GMs or whatever. I mean, that's happening all the time. It's just not coach to player directly. And so I think that on one hand, it doesn't feel that different, but I think it's still good that the coaches are able to focus on what they're doing and focus on the tournament and focus on, decompressing a little bit. And like, I know for a lot of teams, like the exit interviews were happening over the weekend, over Easter weekend. And so a lot of players announced on Tuesday or announced on Sunday or Monday that they were planning to enter the portal right before it opened. And I think a lot of that was the conversations that they were having with the staff, which kind of leads me to the next point that I wanted to make, which is a lot of the consternation or conversation around the transfer portal is this idea that all of the players are abandoning the program, or like, oh, we had 10 guys enter the portal. Like, what's going on? Like, why is the coaching staff losing all of their guys? And I remember banging the drum for this last year, and I'm going to do it again this year of like, that's not exactly how it's going. Obviously, there are programs that are losing players that they would like to keep. We're not going to pretend for 1 second that is not happening, and that at the mid-major level, and specifically teams that are losing their entire starting lineup are not wanting that to happen. But for the power conference fans, if you're a fan of a team that maybe underperformed last year and 5, 6, 7 of your guys are in the transfer portal, the idea that must be because the coach cannot pay them or cannot retain them, it's probably the opposite. It is probably that the coaching staff is pushing out those players. And this is not a narrative that I'm just making up. I know for a fact that this is happening at many, many, many different schools. And I've heard firsthand from players, from agents, from coaches that this is part of the deal. This is part of the situation. And it's not a fun part of it. But and I think it's fair to argue that that's still not, like, if you don't like that, that's fine. I don't think it's a fun part of the game either. But the idea that, oh, the players leaving and the coaches being unable to keep players is part of the problem, is like, that's not only not how it's often, it's sometimes rare that it's happening that way. It's often that the coaches are clearing space on their roster or allocating a huge chunk of their money to 2 or 3 different guys and pushing the rest of the guys out the door.
Makes a lot of sense to me, Andy. I think, it's easy for people to assume things when they don't know. Either way, right? Assuming that coaches are pushing guys out when they aren't, or assuming that guys are getting left out of the cold when they're actually getting pushed out. And so I think all of that is happening. But yeah, I mean, we complain so much, I don't know if that's the right word, but I'll use it, about all these players getting in and leaving and changing. And it's like, well, maybe the coaching staff wasn't exactly happy with their effort, or how they learned sets or didn't learn, all of that stuff. And so I think it's just, if nothing else, it's a great reminder that there is so much going on behind the scenes and underneath the hood and behind the curtain, and Oz is doing his thing, whatever phrase you want to use with that's all happening, and all stuff we got to reckon with.
And I think I was going to say, I think sometimes it's the coaching staff having honest conversations that are not pushing them out or anything like that. It's more like, we believe that you are better suited to go somewhere else. Like, we envision your role next year being the 8th man or 9th man, and we're going to pay you accordingly. And maybe you are okay with that, but I think it's better for you to go explore your options. And I think that is a part of this that is not as discussed as well. And even mid-major programs, like, their best players, I've seen this story many times where their best players are wanting to stay, and the coach is like, it would be insane of you to stay. I can only give you $25,000, and Big Ten schools are going to call and offer you $500K, and you cannot stay here for $25,000 when you have an opportunity to get $500,000, especially going into your senior year when you're not going to be an NBA player. Like, I think that those conversations are happening way more than people think, and it's just having to play the game, and it's unfortunate and not fun for fans of those mid-major teams, certainly, but it is part of the deal right now.
Well, and it's which, let me say this first, that is the healthy way this should be happening.
Yes.
In the same way that Yaxel, we praised Yaxel Lindeborg's transparency with Tracy Wolfson heading to halftime of the national championship game. Coaches who are willing to have these conversations with their players, these honest conversations, Andy, I'll phrase it this way: they love them enough to be honest with them and let the player decide. Hey,
Mhm.
I want to be honest and truthful with you about where we as a staff project your role to be next year.
Mhm. Yep.
If you're willing to stick around and be part of that, all the better, man, because
Mhm.
that means you're bought in. But if
Mhm.
you're not and you think you should go somewhere else, or we think that would be healthy for you,
Mhm.
blessings, and we're going to send great recommendations out the door
Right.
with, you know? And so, Andy, I love that you bring that up, because that to me is the healthiest way this goes. And it's similar. It reminds me of, you know, we often hear players, like we've heard AJ DeBanta be like, maybe I would think about coming
Mhm.
back because my mom wants me to get a degree. I
Mhm.
guarantee you, Kevin Young is having that exact same
Yeah.
conversation, but like, hey, AJ, you cannot stay.
Yeah.
You're about to be drafted second at worst.
Yep.
It would be draft malpractice of you
Yeah.
to not go right. And so it's like that exact same conversation to me, Andy, as we have this. Now, another wrinkle of it, because I know we got to keep moving, is the fact you and I mentioned a second ago that the portal, this is the latest it's ever opened. The day after the national championship, we've been clamoring, or at least I have. I don't want to speak for you because I can't remember for certain. For it to be after the tournament is said and done. We got that now for the first time. There are other possibilities. You know, it happened the day after. Could it be the week after, like next Monday, the day after the Masters or something like that, to give a week to let the dust settle or whatever it is? And so, Andy, as we're right now in the midst of it, do you like this adjustment? Not the duration, but the date that it opened.
Yeah, I like it better than the previous two iterations. I think like it doesn't change a whole lot in the sense that players who are planning to enter the transfer portal are announcing that they're planning to enter the transfer portal pretty much around the same time that they would have previously. But now you're not having commitments happening during the NCAA tournament. You're not putting teams that are in the tournament at a disadvantage where they're having to split their focus. Like Michigan and UConn, obviously they were aware of the transfer portal, but because they're not technically allowed to contact recruits directly, they didn't have to give that as much attention. And I think this is good. I've been split on whether I think it should be extended more or not. On one hand, I think the idea of there being a little bit of a lull does seem kind of nice. But on the other hand, I think maybe just get right into it. Like, I think this is working fine, because if you extended it for a week, it wouldn't look a whole lot different than it does right now.
No,
We would
exactly.
just be, everybody would just be kind of waiting for the actual time when they can start signing with teams. And I think getting that done sooner, getting guys so they can start moving and planning and preparing for their next stop. I mean, it would be nice for somebody like North Carolina who's trying to make a coaching hire or whatever, but for the most part, I think it's fine to happen the way that it is. I think this was a good change, and I think it'll stick this way for a while, and I think that's fine.
And it's good for our sport, Andy, because it keeps college basketball right at the
Yep.
focal of the sports world.
That's a great point.
I know we're about to get to the Masters this weekend. That's going to be the focal point.
Mhm.
Baseball is really just getting going, but it's like, hey, keep your eyes on basketball because the transfer
Mhm.
portal is happening. But Andy, yeah, to your point about like Michigan, I saw a picture last night, like on Instagram or something, I can't remember, of I
Mhm.
don't even remember who it was. I don't think it was Dusty May, but a Michigan assistant sitting down to open up the transfer portal in
Yep.
the late hours after
Yep.
the championship. Or I saw, you mentioned North Carolina. I saw a picture from North Carolina that they sent out on their social media of it's portal season, and it was Coach Malone sitting down to start texting people. And by the way, I quote tweeted it with, "Who is he texting? Wrong answers only." Got some banger results. You should go check those out. But apparently it was Dylan Mingo and Maximo Adams, who we talked about earlier, right?
Nice.
Going straight to those freshmen. And so just, yeah, there are those wrinkles, but I think by and large for 360 of the teams, just sometime immediately after the tournament like this will work just fine. Andy, there are tons of elite players who are already in the transfer portal. Who are some of the biggest, most surprising, I'm going to ask you, most shocking that have done it so far? Andy's going to answer that for you in just a second. Right after I tell you about Indeed. Workplace chaos, your deadlines are stacking up, your email inbox is overflowing, and the one job position you still need to fill is sitting there open, and you can't do anything about it because you don't have the margin. So when the pressure's on and you need the right hire, that's a job for Indeed-sponsored jobs. Who helps you hire and reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for? The skills, the experience, the location. So you're not just like hoping, oh, can the right candidate stumble across my post? No. Here's a stat that says it all. In the minute that I'm talking to you, 27 companies just like yours make a hire with Indeed according to their worldwide data. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching, more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Less stress, less time, more results. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, that's a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. And listeners to our podcast are going to get a $75 sponsored job credit to help your job post get the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to that site, Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on Locked On College Basketball. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? That's a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. This episode is also brought to you by Robinhood. What if sports were traded like markets? Well, now you can put your knowledge to the test in real time with Robinhood prediction markets. It's not you against the house. It's you participating in a live market. You can buy or sell your positions live all game long. Use your sports knowledge in the moments that matter. Robinhood prediction markets have changed the game. It's people moving the action. So when the momentum shifts, you can move right along with it. I've always known the game, but I never had a dynamic way to apply that knowledge. But now I can actually take part live in a market powered by the people. So you're no longer just a spectator. Play by play, you decide. So trade every play with Robinhood, now available all across the U.S. Download the Robinhood app now to begin. Futures and cleared swaps trading involves significant risk and is not appropriate for everyone. Event contracts are offered by Robinhood Derivatives, LLC, a registered futures commission merchant and swap firm. Andy, there have been massive names. There have been names you've never heard of. There have been scholarship level players. There have been, I know everyone's a scholarship player now, but like walk-on level players. There will be plenty more names to come. There will be maybe even bigger names than we've already heard. But Andy, with the 10 or so, no, I'm just kidding, with the over 1,000 names that we've already heard enter the portal, who to you has been the most shocking entry?
Yeah, there's a couple names that come to mind. I'm going to start with what I think is probably also the best player who is in the transfer portal right now, and that's Flory Bidunga. Flory Bidunga from Kansas was just outstanding last year for the Jayhawks. He's also declared for the NBA draft. He's going to go through that process. Would not stun me if he does enough at the NBA draft combine to end up being in the NBA, in which case the transfer portal won't necessarily matter here. But, it seemed like a good fit at Kansas. He was at a blue blood. Bill Self announced he was returning. Bidunga was, again, a great fit for what Self likes to do offensively and defensively. Like that's kind of why it stood out. Like there's some great players here that I'm like, well, I can sort of see. Maybe they're at a school that's known to be a little less resource rich than other schools. Maybe they didn't seem to jive with the coaching staff, like whatever. But like Bidunga, like there's no real apparent reasons why Kansas wouldn't be the main fit for him going forward. I suppose it's possible he could make more money elsewhere, and that is what the rumors are saying at this point. But it was surprising to me to see his name in there. And for what it's worth, 4 players from Kansas, all who announced after Bill Self said he was coming back. That also includes Bryson Tiller and Paul Bia, as well as Marco Jackson. So again, 4 players is not catastrophic, but this is a little surprising to me to see this many departures from Kansas coming off of what was a decent year and with Self returning.
Yeah, that's the thing to me too, Andy. Like, if we hadn't already heard Coach Self specifically say I'm coming back, I would have been like, are you guys telling us something with all right? Right. And I don't think that because of what Coach Self said, but it's shocking. Andy, I'm going to answer the question I asked you. For me, the most shocking is John Blackwell announcing his transfer portal entry from Wisconsin. Truly nothing shocks us anymore because, this is the era we live in. But Andy, he just feels like such a good fit at Wisconsin to me. He fits Greg Gard's style well. That duo of Black Boyd, and Nick Boyd there had made such a good duo. But he's played all 3 years at Wisconsin. He's risen in points per game every year. He averaged just shy of 20 points a game this year. He would stand to reason that he's going to take an even bigger leap again next year, as who knows what the power dynamics in the Big Ten are going to be. I expect Michigan to be good again. Michigan State, we'll see as the transfer portal ebbs and flows. But Andy, he just culturally, talently, all of that seems to make sense. And
Mhm.
the only thing that I've been able to think of that maybe makes some sense to me is maybe this is a situation similar to what you talked about earlier, where Greg Gard is like,
Mhm.
hey, John, you've been so great for us, and we're
Yeah.
so grateful for you. But there is probably a humongous bag out there waiting on you somewhere. Why don't you go test that?
Yeah.
If it turns out that's not true, or you don't like the cultural fit, come on back. We'd love to have you again in Madison. But man, I just that one was truly shocking to me.
Yeah, I would agree. A couple others that stand out to me for different reasons would be a Caden Lewis from Villanova and Aiden Sherrill from Alabama. They both seem like good fits where they were. And just like Caden Lewis is a really rock solid fit at Villanova. He played well for Kevin Willard. They recruited him. Obviously, he had opportunities to go other places. He ends up at Villanova. They have the coaching change. He stays through that. He has a good, productive freshman year. Villanova, is probably not as resource rich as some of these other schools, and maybe it's as simple as that. But that one sort of surprised me. Aiden Sherrill as well. Again, Alabama, very resource heavy. Doesn't seem like it's a pay thing, but he also seemed like a good fit. So that those two kind of, I was like, I'm looking at our notes with Duke Harris on the list. Like Duke Harris doesn't surprise me. He's a very good player that is in the transfer portal, but like Wake Forest does not have a ton of resources. That's a well-known thing. So like that is less surprising to me. But Sherrill and Lewis are guys that I was like, I kind of would have thought that they'd be more likely to stay than go.
Well, and Andy, I actually had some texting back and forth with a source on a Caden Lewis, because
Mhm.
he's also declared for the NBA draft.
Yeah.
And what the source shared with me was that Lewis is in no rush for the NBA, but it's a great opportunity to get feedback on areas of weakness and to improve from the people at the highest level. And man,
Mhm.
I always advocate for this. I'm like,
Yeah.
if you have an opportunity to go and allow your future employer to tell you what you need to get better at so that they're more likely to employ you, why on earth would you not? Right? Like, it just makes so much sense to me.
Yeah, I always thought that as well. I'm like, the point of college, and I know that college athletics is separate from college in a lot of ways. I'm not going to pretend that it's not, but the point of college is to get prepared for the real world and your job prospects. And like the idea of not allowing players at the collegiate level to get feedback about how they can improve their job prospects seems kind of insane to me, and like the exact opposite of what you're trying to do in college. So I advocate for anybody, and I'm glad the rules have changed where you can now declare for the draft, get that feedback, and come back to school, because I think that is a smart thing to be able to do. Isaac, a couple other names here I'll just rattle off quickly. Samto Cyril from Georgia is in the portal. Donnie Freeman from Syracuse, who's got some NBA draft buzz around him. Marcus Burton, which was a little bit of a surprise to me coming off the injury from Notre Dame. Darren Harris at Duke. I only mention him because he's the first player to enter the portal from Duke in nearly 2 years, which is incredibly impressive. So, not something we've seen happen for John Shire's team all that often. Not shocked that Darren Harris is in the portal specifically. And then you got Jackson Shellstad from Oregon. That one surprised me a little bit because he was sort of on the Peyton Pritchard track of being a 4-year starter for Dana Altman and the Ducks. Now it's looking like he's a pretty strong lean to go join Tommy Lloyd in Arizona next year, which is a great fit for him. Paulus Morauskas from St. Mary's, Jeremiah Wilkinson, a handful of tons of other ones as well that we could name. But I'm excited to see how this all goes. Excited to see where some of these guys end up. We're obviously going to have tons and tons of conversations around this transfer portal over the next, I was going to say 2 weeks, but 3 months, really, if not longer, that we're going to be talking about this, the fits, the best portal classes, the biggest portal losses, whatever it may be. So stay with us. If you're still listening this week because you're coming off the national championship, you don't need to go anywhere because the podcast is not going anywhere. We are still with you 5 days a week throughout the entire offseason until the start of the 26-27 season. So definitely stick with us every single day as we break down the transfer portal, break down the coaching carousel, break down recruiting, NBA draft, all of that stuff coming up over the next couple of months. For now, though, that is going to wrap it up for us today here on the show. As always, we will continue to do this even in the offseason. We want to say apologies to the Lawyer family as well as apologies to the Sanford family. Let's go Wild Popes. Cheers to the Mick Bruins. And until next time, peace out.